can't be in here. Step out, now." The sharp command echoed against the polished floors of the restricted access staff lounge at Oakbridge Police HQ. Officer Trenton, a hardened veteran with a clipped tone, towered over a young black man seated calmly near the espresso station. A small security pass dangled from the man's neck, but it didn't seem enough to quell the officer's suspicion. "I'm allowed," the young man said quietly, meeting Trenton's glare. "I have an appointment." Trenton's jaw tightened. "Your kind doesn't belong in a secured facility without proper authorization. Where's your superior?" A hush descended over the lounge. A few off-duty officers looked up from their phones. The air crackled with uneasy curiosity. No one intervened, at least not yet. What they didn't know, they had just decided to intimidate someone they'd regret challenging. Drop a comment if you believe access should be based on truth, not bias. Tell us where you're reading from, and brace yourself for the swiftest twist of fate you've ever seen. You don't want to miss what happens next. Officer Trenton's stance widened, as though bracing for a fight he believed was inevitable. In his eyes, the lounge was strictly for uniformed officers and top brass, certainly not for a young civilian who looked out of place. The hush around them amplified every small movement. The rustle of the young man's shirt sleeve, the scuff of Trenton's boot on the floor. From the way Trenton's lip curled, it was clear he'd already made up his mind. To him, this young, black man was a trespasser, an intruder, a probable threat. It didn't matter that the security pass was right there. If it were someone else, someone who looked a bit more at home in a police facility, maybe the pass would have been enough. But in this moment, prejudice masqueraded as protocol. The lounge's other occupants hovered in awkward silence. Some pretended to scroll their phones, others stared openly. A few seemed uneasy, knowing something about Trenton's reputation, or simply sensing the tension in the air. But no one stepped forward to question what was happening. The young man exhaled, maintaining a respectful tone. "I'm waiting for an official who told me to sit here until she arrived." Trenton responded with a sneer. "Sure you are. And I'm the mayor. Let's see if you're still so smug once I call for backup. We'll get to the bottom of this appointment you claim to have." The words stung because they carried the weight of all too familiar disrespect. Rules were selectively enforced, and the young man was reduced to a stereotype before he could even explain. In Trenton's mind, the uniform gave him absolute authority, and no matter what the badge around the young man's neck said, it would never be enough. The young man raised his hands slightly, palms facing out, a gesture of de-escalation more than surrender. He spoke softly, each word measured. "Officer, my name is—" "I'm not interested in your name," Trenton cut in. His glare was unwavering. "Save it for the department security detail. You're not supposed to be here. End of story." A flicker of annoyance crossed the young man's face, but his calm never wavered. He tried again, voice respectful, but firm. "I was told to wait for Captain Holloway. Captain Holloway." Trenton scoffed, rolling his eyes. "And you're just on a first-name basis with the highest-ranking female captain in this precinct? Right. Let me guess. You two are old friends from the country club?" A low heat of indignation rose in the young man's chest. He could feel the sting of humiliation, but snapping back would only confirm Trenton's biased assumptions. So he held his tongue, remembering the advice he'd often given to others in tense confrontations. Remain polite, remain calm, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. Around them, a couple of off-duty officers shifted in their chairs, looking uncomfortable. They exchanged glances, uncertain if it was their place to intervene. The lounge manager, normally chatty, hovered behind the counter, biting his lip in silence. Everyone seemed to sense that stepping in risked incurring Trenton's wrath. The young man inhaled, exhaled, then decided to offer one last piece of evidence. "Look at my pass, officer. It has the official stamp. I'm here under direct authorization." Trenton brushed aside the lanyard. Sure, I'll let security confirm it. Then I'll personally escort you out. Don't try to run. The attempt to clarify had failed. The young man's calm explanation only hardened Trenton's resolve. No empathy, no listening, no chance. Trenton's radio crackled to life as he pressed the call button. Dispatch, this is Officer Trenton at the staff lounge. I've got an unauthorized individual refusing to leave the premises, requesting backup. The words reverberated across the hush, stirring a ripple of anxiety among the onlookers. A quiet murmur rose in the corners of the lounge. One of the off-duty officers discreetly took out his phone, while a staff member behind the coffee machine looked on, worried. The tension felt electric. Another officer, older, with silver hair, wavered near the doorway. He looked as if he might intervene, but then stepped back, perhaps wary of overstepping rank. The young man remained in his seat, shoulders squared, refusing to be bullied into standing. He'd done nothing wrong. Dignity was his shield, and though the sting of this injustice was keen, he wouldn't let it morph into anger. Not yet. That's right, Trenton barked into the radio. He's resisting orders from a uniformed officer, possibly trespassing, with forged credentials. Someone audibly gasped. The words forged credentials were heavy accusations, especially inside a police facility. The weight of them sent a jolt through bystanders who now recognized this confrontation was spiraling into an official incident. The lounge staff exchanged worried glances. A hush fell again as Trenton raised his voice, broadcasting to everyone. I don't care who told you you could be here. This is my station, my rules. If you think some fancy sponsor or buddy-buddy arrangement is going to save you, you're mistaken. The young man looked around, noticing phone cameras aimed in their direction. It was a moment of truth, an escalation that could ruin careers or shape new reputations. He swallowed hard, wishing Captain Holloway would arrive. Because soon, the real reason for his presence would break open, and it would be bigger than any of them expected. A crisp vibration broke the charged silence, his phone buzzing in his jacket pocket. The young man glanced at the screen. Captain Holloway's name glowed on the caller ID. Relief washed over him like a cool wave. Slowly, deliberately, he answered. Yes, ma'am. I'm in the lounge. There's a misunderstanding, but I'm holding up. Trenton's eyes narrowed. Hand over that phone, he demanded, practically seething. But the young man calmly ended the call and tucked the device away. The message was clear. Someone important was on the other end, and he was not about to relinquish his lifeline. Moments later, the lounge doors burst open. In strode Captain Holloway, tall, poised, exuding the understated authority that comes from years of distinguished service. Behind her marched a police executive with gold insignias on his collar, followed by a local news crew, invited for a station feature story. The cameras caught the confrontation in full color. Captain Holloway's voice sliced through the tension. Officer Trenton, stand down. Trenton stiffened. Ma'am, I was just upholding protocol with this unauthorized. She silenced him with a single glare. Then she turned to the young man, her expression turning concerned. Are you all right? She asked gently. He nodded, though relief was etched all over his face. Behind Captain Holloway, the police executive cleared his throat. Officer Trenton, meet Captain Kamari Hayes, he announced, each syllable weighted with significance. He's our newly appointed captain, transferred here as part of our departmental youth and community innovation program. A stunned hush filled the lounge. Eyes flicked to the gold rank bars pinned discreetly on the young man's shirt beneath his jacket. Realization broke like a thunderclap on Officer Trenton's face. The man he'd been harassing wasn't just an out-of-place civilian, he was Trenton's superior. You could almost feel the shift in the room's atmosphere as the truth took shape. This wasn't just any young officer who'd managed to sneak in with borrowed credentials. Captain Kamari Hayes, barely in his late 20s, had built a reputation that reached far beyond Oakbridge. He was an academic standout at the police academy, earning top honors in conflict resolution and community outreach. Before that, he'd been a youth ambassador, working with underprivileged teens to bridge trust between neighborhoods and law enforcement. People whispered his name in awe. Hayes, the wunderkind who'd impressed the mayor with a bold plan to reduce juvenile crime rates through mentorship programs. The local media hailed him as a fresh face for a changing era of policing, an emblem of how the force could evolve. Now, that same rising star stood in front of a scowling, suddenly uncertain Officer Trenton. A hush fell as onlookers realized the magnitude of Trenton's mistake. The scorn and suspicion he'd thrown at Hayes had been based on assumptions, and each assumption was now crumbling under the glaring truth. Captain Hayes had every reason to be there. In fact, he outranked a good number of the people in the lounge. Trenton's posture sagged, the muscles in his jaw going slack. His composure drained away as if someone had flipped a switch from power stance to panic. Nervous energy rippled around the room. Staff members who'd hovered, unsure, now saw they'd made a grave error by not intervening sooner. Hayes, for his part, remained perfectly poised. Even after what he'd endured, his eyes reflected not gloating triumph, but a thoughtful gravity. He embodied the very ideals he'd been recognized for: empathy, composure, vision. And most of all, he was living proof that prejudice could blind even the most seasoned officers to the very truth standing before them. Captain Holloway stepped forward, her gaze like ice when it fell on Trenton. "Officer, you will stand down immediately and accompany Sergeant Lopez to give your statement. Do I make myself clear?" Trenton's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Yes, Captain," he managed, voice shaky. He shot one last disbelieving look at Hayes, then relinquished his radio to Sergeant Lopez, who had just arrived for backup. Ironically, the same backup Trenton called to remove the trespasser. The hush in the lounge deepened. People who had been too afraid to speak seconds earlier exchanged relieved, uncertain glances. The lounge manager, breathless, quietly, apologized to Hayes. A news camera recorded every second, capturing the crackling tension that still hung in the air. Then Captain Holloway turned to the newly minted Captain Hayes, quietly asking if he was all right. He gave a slight nod. Her tone softened as she addressed the staff. "Escort Officer Trenton out of this lounge until further notice." No cheers erupted. This was a place of order, not riot. Yet a wave of respect for Hayes rolled through the room, almost palpable. The young captain's silence said more than a lecture ever could. Dignity under attack, grace in the face of humiliation, had made its point. Outside, a few members of the media readied their microphones, itching to capture the fallout. Trenton was ushered away, head bowed, seething with a mixture of anger and shame. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes remained composed, as if quietly reminding everyone that true leadership is measured by composure under fire, not by loud declarations of authority. In that moment, the tables had fully turned. The kid who didn't belong turned out to be the one calling the shots. The aftermath was swift. An internal review panel convened to address Officer Trenton's misconduct. Though the final decision was still pending, whispers abounded that he'd be placed on administrative leave or demoted. Local news outlets had a field day, framing the incident as a cautionary tale about bias in law enforcement. Yet the real story that captured public attention was the rise of Captain Kamari Hayes. Social media lit up with clips from the station lounge, accompanied by hashtags about unity, respect, and the power of youth leadership. Interviews poured. And every channel wanted a statement from the young captain. What did he think about Officer Trenton's actions? How would he move forward? Captain Hayes' official response was equal parts grace and guidance. "We all have biases we must address. I'm committed to building an environment where every officer and civilian is treated with dignity, regardless of appearance or assumptions." The statement resonated widely, inspiring other departments across the state to examine their own protocols on profiling and prejudice. Meanwhile, Hayes received an invitation to address a public forum on law enforcement training reforms. City council members saw in him someone who could bridge the gap between the community and the badge. His calm under pressure had shown leadership beyond his years. This was not a man shaped by anger, but by the desire to change a flawed system from within. In many ways, the entire fiasco accomplished what no press release could have. It thrust a bright spotlight onto the department's commitment to progress and highlighted the cost of blind prejudice. Officer Trenton's personal reckoning became a catalyst for departmental growth. And Captain Hayes? He'd proven that composure and courtesy can speak louder than 1,000 indignations. The incident went viral almost overnight, resonating far beyond Oakbridge. Other police departments took note, launching new bias awareness training programs and adopting more transparent protocols for restricted zones. Community members who once felt sidelined by law enforcement now saw a shining example of what the next generation of policing could look like: diverse, empathetic, and unafraid to hold itself accountable. As for Captain Kamari Hayes, he didn't bask in the limelight for long. He viewed his rapid rise not as a personal trophy, but as a responsibility. With Captain Holloway's support, he expanded mentorship programs, inviting local youth to the station, eager to show them that a badge could stand for service rather than intimidation. He shared his story of nearly being dismissed on sight by his own subordinate, to illustrate how urgent reform truly was. In the following months, new guidelines were introduced: clearer visitor protocols, mandatory cultural competency training, and an open-door policy encouraging officers to speak up when they witnessed discrimination. Perhaps most importantly, Captain Hayes continued championing a future where authority was no excuse for prejudice. Their story, captured on video, became the station's turning point, a moment etched in the institution's history. And whenever new recruits asked why the department placed such emphasis on respect and unbiased enforcement, the older officers would point to the lounge and say, "That's where Captain Hayes taught us all a lesson." Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly just for being somewhere they belonged? Would you have spoken up in that lounge? Do you believe access and opportunity should never be determined by appearance? Share your thoughts below. Your voice matters.